Thank you so much for that fun start to our service this morning. And welcome to each and every one of you. By the way, I've missed seeing you. I was away for a couple of Sundays. I know that seems like forever. It seemed like forever for me too, but it's good to be back in this warm space with so many warm friends. So welcome to one and all to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where our mission is to join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world, or as we say in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. Again, welcome to one and all. Glad to have you here today. We begin by welcoming all that you bring with you, all of your uniqueness, your unique beliefs, your background, your lifestyle, your experiences, your differences. All that helps make you who you are is welcome here today. And this is so for those of you who are in the room with us, meeting with us in person, including those of you who might be joining us for the first time or visiting. We're glad to have you as well. And of course, we're glad to have all of those who are streaming with us. So welcome to one and all this morning. I want to begin with by making note that we have our unity candle lit at the front of our service, or in front of our sanctuary, I should say, something we do when one of our members has passed away. And I know last Sunday you heard that Ray Emerson passed away on October 29th. I wasn't here for that announcement, but I wanted to officially put a candle out in his honor today. I was very sad when I heard the news about Ray. It was unexpected. I'd seen him here just the week before. And Ray was a very, just, I don't know how to describe him as, if you knew him, you loved him. I mean, that's just the way Ray was. He was an interesting mix of brilliance and intelligence and knowledgeable, a wise person that could talk to you about so many different issues that he cared about. And at the same time, he was almost a stand-up comedian. You know, he was so much fun and brought so much lightness and laughter to our lives. And it just, you know, Ray made everything lighter, you know, and so it made me sadder when I knew he was no longer in my life. And I think a lot of us feel that way. So we have our unity candle lit in honor of his life and his light and his lightness. So he will be missed. Also want to let you know that next Sunday the 13th, after our service, 11 o'clock service, we're going to have a Thanksgiving potluck dinner, and we will be providing the turkey, not the turkeys. You can bring those. No, the turkey. But we would ask seriously that you bring a dish to share, a Thanksgiving type dish to share with others. That would be nice. Yeah, so next Sunday, and it'll be a lot of fun to be able to do that. Oh, I know. I wanted to also say to those of you who are streaming with us, we do like to be as inclusive as possible with our virtual attendees. And unfortunately, when we have physical gatherings here at the space and you can't be here, we leave you out just a little bit. But I have been working on some digital recipes. They taste a little bland right now, but I'm going to keep working on it. And until we get those sorted out, please enjoy something next Sunday afternoon, and wherever you're at is a way of joining in this communal experience. So, and then also next Sunday is going to be an intergenerational service. So that means everyone, including our children, can stay in the service. It's a service called Puppets and People. What's the difference? I think that's the title. Something like that. And I want to delineate that difference because a lot of us don't know the difference between puppets and people. Okay, more to be said. We won't talk about that now. But I will bring some of my characters to help out with that too. So hopefully it'll be lots of fun. So I hope all of you will come, and the kiddos will be here, and we'll have a good time next Sunday. All right, now in light of my sermon coming up on homelessness and housing, I wanted to let you know about an opportunity Tuesday night at 6 o'clock, 6 to 7, at the main library downtown, Central Library on Main Street. It is entitled Getting Real About Homelessness in Spokane, a Proven Plan to Meaningfully Address Homelessness. And actually, there's Shane back there. Shane Groenholz is helping to put that on for our community and let me know about it. So there's going to be some, I have to look at my notes here, Shane, to give everyone the headliners, because I didn't write it down. But it's going to include folks like Ben Stuckert, who I know that a lot of you know, former city council president, and he's been working on homeless issues for some time now, along with Gavin Cooley and Chris Patterson, who also have some impressive bios I'm not going to go into this morning. But, as we try to find out, what is the best direction for us as a church to go in responding to what is a really turning out to be a really difficult situation, particularly, even trying to get housing in our community. Low-income housing is proving to be overwhelmingly difficult given the resistance and the fear that people have. So I'm going to begin kind of addressing that fear in my sermon today, but I really think that as a congregation, one of the best things we can do, and something that should be fairly simple for us to do, is to begin to host a series of forums right here in this building, forums that we can stream and record for the community, that will begin to humanize the people that we're afraid to have as our neighbors. Once we humanize the people that we have been afraid of and the people that we have been demonizing, our circle suddenly gets bigger. Right? That's how it works. And that's one of the best things this church has been able to do, is to help folks who are a little bit cloistered in their openness to some others, to recognize those others are part of them. And once we recognize that, we want them to have the same kind of value of life and opportunities that we have. I think that's the work we can do. So more to come on that later, but I'm going to be interested in learning what we can on Tuesday night. With that said, we are going to cancel the Kurkara Dojo meeting on Tuesday. Usually also meets at 6 o'clock on Tuesdays. We just started meeting again here in the building last Tuesday, so sorry about that. But I would encourage everybody, in whatever group you might have, if you can make it, to please make it to the library. So Shane, thanks for putting this on and letting us know. Yeah. Also want to apologize for our web woes. For those who have tried to go to our church website for apparently a couple of weeks now, you're getting something saying it's not accessible. That's because it's not accessible. Yeah. We've ascertained the problem. We just don't have a solution. So we've been working with the host company that we've had for years, and they can't figure it out either. So we will continue to try to get it figured out, and then we will consider who will be hosting our website downstream. So, but apologies for that. We've been sending out emails. Keep your eye on those. Those will give you certain links that you will be able to get to direct events, like if you're streaming this service. Hopefully you got an email with a link to it, as well as other meetings. So we'll do our best, but apologize for that. Okay, I know I said a lot already this morning, but I wanted to fill you in on what's happening, and I do want to give you a couple more minutes this morning to greet one another, as is also usual on Sunday morning. So yeah, please say hi to some old friends and make some new ones at this time. Okay, thank you, and more opportunity to visit with one another during our social hour. By the way, I will go back for a little bit after the service, but I have to get home a little early. We have some relatives in town, and I have to get them to the airport, say goodbye and get them to the airport, so you'll understand. But you can visit more after the service during social hour. In the meantime, we are going to move forward by lighting our chalice. The chalice is the symbol of our unity and solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
For our opening reflection today, I offer these words of Barack Obama from his 1995 memoir, Dreams from My Father, on what he was learning about community and how, as he was entering the third decade of his life. At the time, about to graduate from college, I was operating mainly on impulse, like a salmon swimming blindly upstream towards the site of his own conception. In class and seminars, I would dress up these impulses in the slogans and theories that I discovered in books, thinking, falsely, that the slogans meant something, that they somehow made what I felt more amenable to proof. But at night, lying in bed, I would let the slogans drift away to be replaced with a series of images, romantic images, of a past I'd never known. Such images became a form of prayer for me, bolstering my spirits, channeling my emotions in a way that words never could. They told me that I wasn't alone in my particular struggles, and that communities had never been a given in this country, at least not for blacks. Communities had to be created, fought for, tended like gardens. They expanded or contracted with the dreams of men.
We're going to sing a very familiar hymn today. It's called Blue Boat Home. It's number 1064 in your turquoise hymnal if you care to look there. Of course, we'll have the words on the screen. And we're doing this in honor of Ray Emerson. One of the things that Ray did was take a sailboat and sail most of the way around the world. And he did many other things. I was impressed when I spoke with his daughter last week. He was primarily one of the people that got McDonald's to get rid of putting their hamburgers in styrofoam boxes, for one thing. And he also was kind of a watchdog for the pipeline in Alaska and put together some things that helped that be a safer project. So in honor of Ray, please rise as you're willing and able to sing Blue Boat Home for his sailor self.
Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder.
now going to kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds this morning. I did not receive any particular requests this week, but we are going to begin, as we have been for the past several months now, on behalf of the people of Ukraine and that part of the world that are being most impacted by the violence and war that's going on there. And let's take a moment of silence, or semi-silence is okay, all right? For the young parents with young children, semi-silence is okay, as we consider others who might be on our hearts and minds, and you're welcome to name them aloud. Very loud if you want, right, kids? Okay. Those named aloud and those embraced in our semi-silence and in the beautiful sound of children's voices, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. And we now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which helps sustain this community and our mission to the larger world.
Autumn time, red leaves fall, while the weeping sky looks over all. Demeter sadly walks the land, the dying grasses in her hand. Autumn time, red leaves fall, autumn.
Thank you. At this time, I'd love to invite all of the children forward for our time for all ages. You can walk or crawl or wheel on up to the front. And today I have a story that is about a simple little spider who did a very amazing thing. And you'll find versions of this story in Christian, Jewish, and Muslim traditions, and in ancient Japanese folktales as well. In the Christian version, the baby Jesus, Mary, and Joseph are hiding from King Herod. In the Jewish version, a young King David is hiding from Saul. In the Muslim version, the Prophet Muhammad and his friend Abu Bakr are hiding from a crowd of people who want to harm them outside the city of Mecca. And in the Japanese version, the great shogun warrior Yoritomo is hiding from his enemies. In all of these stories, though, the spider is just a spider. And before we begin, I'm going to need some help with the scenery. I need rocks. Will some of you be rocks? Max, Theo, will you be rocks on one side of the cave? And Theo and Claire, would you like to be rocks too? Okay, perfect. You just have to sit like that. All right? Let me come show you where to stand. So come right here, Theo. Yeah, you're going to be the roof of the cave. So Theo, stand right here. You want to be a rock? Okay. So you're just going to be a cave. Cave up there. Make yourself really big like this. We're in our cave. Here's a rock. Yeah, you can be right here. There. And Theo, so I'm coming up here. Right here. And we'll remember to take it out. We'll add it to our little tug glove. Perfect. And Charlie, do you want to be in the cave too? And of course, you need a very important person. Marlon? Perfect. Our VIP gets to wear a crown. So there you go, Brooklyn. And then you can stand up right over here. And do you remember who else was in this story? The spider. So you can start just by wrapping your necks.
Okay.
And then you'll hear when it's time to wrap everyone else up.
I'm 4 limbs too short.
All right, so we've got this cave with some rocks, and we've got an awesome roof, and we have our VIP. Let's begin. Well, once upon a time, a very important person, whom we'll call the VIP, was watching a spider weave her web, and the VIP thought to herself, why in the world did God make spiders? What good are they? They aren't beautiful or cute. They can't do tricks. They don't guard the house or make anything we humans can eat or wear. They don't sing or make interesting sounds. And those webs they're always building, they're just a nuisance. And the little spider overheard her, but she didn't care. She just kept working on her web. Soon, though, the very important person was in trouble. Her enemies were out to get her. VIP, can you look scared? She hid in the deepest, darkest cave. Go ahead, VIP, you can stand in front of Zuri there. She hid in the deepest, darkest cave she could find, but still she was worried that her enemies would find her. The spider began weaving her web across the rocks at the front of the cave while the VIP was hiding. The VIP noticed. The VIP noticed that the spider was weaving her web across the front of the entrance, but she was too afraid to shoo her away for fear that her enemies might hear her. So she just stayed very quiet and watched the spider work. In no time, the cave entrance was completely covered by the web. And it was just in time, because right then, the VIP's enemies came running up to the cave. There she is. But they didn't go in, because the spider web made it look like no one had been there in a very long time. And the very important person realized something that day. The VIP thought, wow, spiders are the best. So what if they're not beautiful or cute and can't do tricks or sing and can't guard the house or make things that humans can eat and wear?
He knows me so well.
See, and the enemies have left, right? Oh, she's back. Okay, the spider will still protect Brooklyn. The spider deserves our kindness and respect, just like all animals. Have you ever looked closely at a spider's web? Each individual thread is so thin and delicate that you can barely see it. but the web itself is incredibly strong. And this great strong web, across these great strong boulders up front, was made just by one little spider, doing what spiders do best. What the VIP in our story came to understand is that every being is worthy of kindness and respect. Every being has a precious life to live. Even the littlest spider can save the life of a very important person. Even the little spider is very important too. And now, spider, do you need to cut our web? Oh, the spider is still working. It's a very industrious little spider we have here. Perfect. Oh, are we all untangled, Theo?
That's a tough act to follow. But I'd like to thank all of the dramatis personae. I see acting talent emerging here in the congregation, most excellent. For today's meditation, I invite you into a state of repose. Assume a seated position of balance and comfort. Close your eyes if you like, and breathe calmingly, regularly, evenly, fully. Let these words of contemporary writer Michael Pollan on drawing lessons from nature lead you into meditation. The single greatest lesson the garden teaches us is that our relationship to the planet need not be zero-sum, and that as long as the sun still shines and people can still plan and plant, think and do, we can, if we bother to try, find ways to provide for ourselves without diminishing the world.
I have a brief reading today from Unitarian minister William Schultz. This is the mission of our faith, to teach the fragile art of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all that we must hold the whole world in our hands. Thank you all so much. When human societies shifted from nomadic hunters and gatherers to agrarian farmers around 3,500 years ago, so did the distribution of wealth shift. Prior to this, a particular hunter may have gotten most of the game, or a particular gatherer may have collected more cowrie shells, say, than anyone else, which would have meant that they had a bit more than the others. But other than extra respect, appreciation, recognition, maybe some extra cheering, they remained individuals within a community of relative equals who depended upon each other for their survival. But when agriculture allowed a few individuals to raise and grow most of the food needed for everyone else, this dynamic changed dramatically. These few people had a lot more of what most everyone else needed and wanted, which made them wealthy and elite. Unfortunately for the farmers, a few other individuals recognized this and exploited them with heavy taxation. Monarchs, kings, governors would also claim that the land upon which everyone in the kingdom or country lived belonged exclusively to them, as did everything that was grown or hunted on it. This turned the initially wealthy growers into subsistence farmers, meaning that they were barely able to grow enough to sustain themselves and their families, let alone other families in their community. Most of their produce was taken from the rural countryside to feed the mounting number of people living in cities. It was a forced redistribution of wealth conducted by exploiting the labors of others, a pattern that has continued to this day. Since most people want to feel good about themselves and that their actions are just, the rulers justified such exploitation by looking down upon those they exploited and blamed them for their own woes. Since the growers were always rural, human society has since been a tale of city folk and country folk, as allegorized in Aesop's fable about the city mouse that looks down on its country cousin. Pagan, for example, which many now believe refers to an ancient nature religion, comes from the Greek word pagani, that simply means farmers or country folk. That's who the pagani were, farmers, country folk. Now, certainly those in the countryside practiced different ways and had different beliefs of their own than the city folk, which became a reason for their urban superiors to look down upon them. The very word peasant, which refers to the poorest among them, best translates simply as local inhabitants. That's what the peasants were, the locals, the local yokels, the joke, who could be dismissed as stupid and backward and unrefined. Likewise, heathen comes from a word meaning untilled land, and savage from the Latin word for woods. Peasants, pagans, heathens, savages were all references to people who were looked down upon because they lived in and worked in the land. The surrounding countryside, whom city dwellers depended upon for their groceries. And the best and cheapest way to get them was to take them, which could only be done with a clean conscience by first dehumanizing and demonizing the growers, the farmers, the laborers, the country folk, as inferior beings with evil ways who deserved what they had coming. Believing one holds a superior religion is also a reason used to justify the persecution of others, those pagan ways. The heathen ways, the savage ways, country ways, offended the gods and should be punished. They should be punished for their sacrilege. In his book, Parables as Subversive Speech, theologian William Herzog says ancient agrarian societies essentially had a top tier and a bottom tier. And the top tier comprised of very few compared to the many at the bottom tier. The top tier, he says, was occupied by the ruler, the ruling class, retainers, and a few merchants who controlled 50 to nearly 70% of the annual wealth of their societies. The bottom tier was occupied by peasants, artisans, merchants, the unclean and degraded, and at the very bottom, the lowest of the lows, the expendables, although it contained the lower numbers of the retainer class as well. The ruling elite represented only 1 to 2% of the population. And the retainers, those they hired to protect their interest by exploiting everyone else, represented another 5 to 7%. Okay? 1 to 2%, the ruling class, 5 to 7, made them the wealthiest people, as in our society, the top 10%. While the rest of the wealth went to the ruling class as a whole. Let's just put it that way. Now, merchants and artisans represented 8 to 15% of society, and may be likened to today's upper middle class, although the bar for being upper was very low. The majority of society, the peasants, the local inhabitants, comprised most of the population, between 70 and 80%. Another 5% At the bottom were among the unclean and degraded, whose dire circumstances required them to undertake unclean and degrading jobs, hence the classification that made them unfit for socializing with, and these were among those that Jesus was often criticized for publicly engaging with. Even lower than these untouchables, however, were the expendables, representing 5 to up to 15% of the population at any given time. Herzog says the expendables were people with nothing left to sell but the energies of their bodies and their animal energies. At best, they were day laborers hired on the spot for very meager amounts, or, especially the women and children among them, became prostitutes or joined gangs of bandits. Whatever they did, the average life expectancy once one fell into the class of expendables was less than 6 months. And everyone in the second tier, everyone, right, the 90%, were always teetering on the edge of becoming socially expendable. Now, today we like to think that society has improved a lot since ancient times, and in many ways it has, but in some important ways it hasn't. As Herzog's stratification suggests, things today are much the same as they were then. Today, according to a recent analysis from the Congressional Budget Office, the 3 million people who make up the wealthiest 1% of Americans are collectively worth more than the 291 million that make up the bottom 90%. Okay? The 3 million who make up the wealthiest 1% of Americans are collectively worth more than the 291 million that make up the bottom 90%. After a 2017 study by the Institute of Policy Studies, based on Forbes 400 list of wealthiest person and the Federal Reserve's 2016 survey on consumer finances, it was widely reported that the 3 wealthiest billionaires alone, in our country alone, had more money than half the people in the country combined. Not that so few people being filthy rich is necessarily unjust, nor is getting rid of billionaires necessarily going to do anything to solve poverty. Some people having way too much is not necessarily the cause of lots of people having too little. The problem, rather, is an economic system that doesn't work well for the prosperity of all. Had the vast majority of our nation's citizens become more prosperous, even as a few were becoming hugely prosperous, there would be little to be concerned about, at least in this regard. But since the late 1980s, the rich have been getting richer, as the cliche goes, while the poor have been getting poorer. And this means that there is something wrong and probably unjust about our nation's economic system. An economic system that doesn't work for the well-being of all of its citizens doesn't work. It's a failure. If you abide by the humanistic ethic, right? That human beings should be our top priority. Now, just a year ago, in a Bloomberg News article stated that after years of declines, America's middle class now holds a smaller share of U.S. wealth than the top 1%. Middle class America refers to those who earn between $27,000 a year and $141,000 a year, representing about 76 million households and 60% of the population. Among this class, the younger your generation, the less you have. Those born between 1946 and 1964 have a median wealth of $240,000. Those born between 1965 and 1980 have a median wealth of about $121,000. And those born between 1981 and 1996, the millennials, have a median of only $27,000. And most of the wealth accumulated by the middle class is contained in home equity and retirement funds, not disposable income. When these two sources of wealth are combined, the median amount of household wealth among the middle class is only $200,000, although according to the Census Bureau, 39% of households don't own a home and 48% do not have retirement accounts. In short, as in ancient times, many within the middle class are on the verge of falling into poverty for a variety of reasons, just one unexpected disaster or calamity away, including skyrocketing inflation. So let's consider some of what has happened over just the past few years. The subprime lending scandal, culminating in 2008, was costly to working class Americans in many ways, including making it harder to qualify for home loans. This meant that more Americans would have to rent, causing demand for rental properties, a higher demand for rental properties, leading to rising costs, which continue to escalate to this day. By 2018, only 10 years later, the average rental cost for a 1 to 2 bedroom apartment in the U.S. reached $1,405 a month. At today's wages, that is an impossible amount for millions of Americans. Another reason for the escalating housing prices is that during the past 70 years, Americans, like most of the world's population, are becoming city mice. Since 1950, 64% of us, or I should say in 1950, 64% of us lived in cities. Today it's nearly 85% and mounting. This exodus from the countryside, and progressives need to hear this, from rural communities, from the rust belts and the coal mines and the bread baskets, this exodus from those neighborhoods in our national community has decimated rural communities, causing their equitized wealth to plummet, even as it has caused greater demand for housing in the cities, resulting again in skyrocketing prices and housing shortages. Right? That's logical. That's how it works. More demand, greater need, greater cost. And most recently, due to the economic impacts of COVID-19, including supply chain shortages and rising fuel costs, inflation again is out of control, even after several attempts by the Fed to curtail it. That means that things are tough and getting tougher for most Americans. Not only the 60% in the middle class who are on the edge, but for the rest, that 30% of Americans who have already fallen over the edge and maybe never even managed to climb above it to begin with. So turning to our topic of homelessness. I've gone to some lengths to discuss the similarity between ancient agrarian societies and today's society because I want to begin to dispel a misnomer, if not a prejudice, that many of us have been conditioned to believe regarding homelessness and the homeless, namely that homelessness is the result of addiction and mental illness. Just this week, I met with a fellow who spoke very compassionately about the homeless and our need as a society to better help them by doing more with issues of addiction and mental illness. But he did not say anything about those who might be homeless because they simply can't afford a home. And I bring this up not to criticize him, but to point out how difficult it can be, even for those of us who want to help, to see past this stereotype. But if it's true that homeless is mostly rooted in addiction and mental illness and criminal activity, then the fault lies with the individual, with the homeless person. Right? If you're an addict or mentally incompetent, it has to do with the individual's problems, not society's problem. If, however, it is rooted in poverty, the fault does lie with our entire society and its economic failures. If it is caused by addiction and mental illness, then we can choose whether or not we want to help. To help is but an act of compassion for us, but not our responsibility, because none of it is our fault. On the other hand, we may choose not to help because we think that the smallest handout will only exacerbate things by allowing them to buy more booze and drugs. Or because we must leave mental illness to the experts, like the police that we pay to deal with those sort of things. But if homelessness is mostly caused by poverty because of an inadequate economic system, then the fault is shared by all of us, and it is our responsibility to help. We can help by volunteering our time and resources to those most in need, but we must also help by demanding more of our society. This includes expecting our local, state, and federal officials to make reasonable adjustments to our economy so that it works for everyone. What the hell else are they supposed to be doing? Sorry, I didn't mean to say hell. Universalists can actually say hell because everyone knows we don't really mean it. But we need them to really seriously take this on so that the bottom in our society is never low enough that it doesn't work for everyone. We can't let things get that bad. That's when we know it's not working. We don't want to end up with our own modern version of an expendable class, right? Nothing left to sell but the energies of their bodies and their own animal energies. Individuals who can choose or not to choose to help out of circumstances of their own making. So the question before us is, which is it? Is homelessness a self-induced crisis, or is it the failure of our society? It's reasonable to conclude that most must be true to some extent. So the real question is, which is mostly true? Do most homeless people fit the stereotype or not? And even if they do, is helping still merely a choice, or does it remain our obligation? Can we excuse ourselves from helping by fearing and criminalizing the homeless, often for just being homeless? Or like the expendables of every age, do we criminalize them to justify the status quo and to relieve ourselves of any burden our society has for creating this situation that leaves too many of our citizens out? To begin to wrestle with these questions, it might surprise you to know that the number of homeless people in the U.S. is relatively small. According to recent surveys, there are just under 600,000 homeless people in the country. That's about 70% of whom are individuals, and 30% are families with children. Now, while that's a lot, it's less than 0.2%. That's 0.2% of our population. And the number of homeless in our society is declining and has been since 2015. According to HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, between 2020 and 2021, when the last survey was completed, the number had decreased by 8%, which was huge, even according to the rates we've been seeing. Now, this is obviously good news, but if true, why do tent cities appear to be cropping up in cities throughout the country, something that is a relatively recent phenomenon? Why does it look to us like homelessness is on the rise? Has there been a sudden increase in addiction and debilitating mental illnesses? As a side, let me add here that there are plenty of persons with addictions who are housed and mental illnesses who are not homeless and who contribute and function perfectly well in our society. So even that's a negative stereotype. Or does it seem more likely that as additional people move into our cities, making housing less available and less affordable, that more people will end up sleeping on the streets and in shelters? I read a story a few years ago about a chef who worked in Seattle, where he couldn't afford to live. But commuting every day from someplace far away enough that he could afford was also impossible. So he stayed in the city and slept in his car. He's among the many working poor, working middle class, like teachers and police officers and firefighters, who can no longer afford to live in the communities they serve. According to a 2007 academic study, only 8% of the homeless in Los Angeles were homeless because of drug and alcohol problems. Only 8%. And only 7% were unable to find shelter because they had criminal records. The study found that most people became homeless, rather, for one of three reasons: loss of material resources, loss of family or social connections, and loss of health. Job loss, debilitating illnesses making it impossible to work, for example, divorce causing a cut in income and benefits, and so on, were the kind of reasons that most people became homeless. They are people like most Americans living paycheck to paycheck, who were on the edge of destitution to begin with, not criminals, addicts, or too insane to be functional. In the long ago past, those our societies pushed to the wayside were dismissed as untouchable, unclean, degraded, expendable, and deserving of the circumstances they were in. In the more recent past, they were forced to go live on reservations because they were heathens, pushed into poor communities to live behind red lines with their own kind, or to the other side of the tracks where they could be overlooked by the more affluent. Today, when it comes to the homeless, we've been conditioned to lump everyone into a negative stereotype that frees us of our responsibility to help our neighbors, our fellow citizens, who are part of a society that simply doesn't always work for everyone, including not every hardworking American, be they from the city or in the woods. We live in a society in which wages have remained flat for decades, even as the demand for and cost of housing have steadily risen and are now out of reach for many Americans. The solutions to this embarrassing and painful problem, and what many like to boast is the greatest nation on earth, are numerous. What they need is adequate funding. Given that the number of us who are homeless, given that the number of us who are homeless is so small, less than 0.2%, the investment necessary to solve homelessness is relatively little compared to other issues like student loan forgiveness, dealing with the 2 to 8% of those involved in our criminal justice system, the rising cost of environmental disasters, and certainly far less big-ticket items like public education, policing, the military. We can afford to solve homelessness if we have the will to do so. It's low-hanging fruit. Yet today, the HUD budget isn't half of what it was 45 years ago. As that 2020 Bloomberg article explains, over the years, HUD's disinvestment in public housing and other housing programs forced more low-income people to compete in the Darwinian private housing market, which in turn forced many of them out of the market altogether and onto the streets and into shelters. The problem then is not a lack of resources, it is our lack of will. And this lack of will has been fostered by a false narrative and stereotypes that lumps everyone who is homeless into that category of being addicts, insane, and for that matter, criminal. The official definition of a homeless person is an individual or family who lacks a fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence. In other words, a place to sleep. A homeless person is someone who lacks an adequate place to sleep. Hence, as more communities deal with the problem by simply erecting laws prohibiting people from camping in public areas, being homeless itself becomes a criminal act. Being without an adequate place to sleep is a criminal act. Now, in addition to facing poverty, hunger, the cold, the homeless must fear their own overwhelming, inevitable, and natural urge to sleep, because sleeping on the streets, even when you have no place else to go, makes you a criminal. Criminalizing sleep, putting boulders under overpasses, blocking off access to viaducts, dispersing tent cities and other encampments won't make the problem go away. Nor will isolating our own neighborhoods by drawing red lines around them, succumbing to the fears and prejudices that have been caused in us. So let's own these fears, let's put them in perspective, and let's see through them to who is standing on the other side of them. For dealing with homelessness is not a choice. It is our responsibility toward our fellow citizens and our fellow human beings who are facing difficulties that aren't necessarily of their own making, but because they are part of a system that doesn't yet work for everyone. And as advanced as we have become, and as much as we should have learned from the historic errors of our past, as much prosperity as our nation has experienced, as much wealth as it has, and as much as we all want to see ourselves as just and kind people, we must address homelessness by first acknowledging that in a society such as ours, nobody can be expendable. Thank you.
Well, we're going to finish up musically today with a song that most of you know. At least you know some of the verses. This is "This Land Is Your Land" by Woody Guthrie. And we're going to sing today a couple of the verses that don't get sung very much. He wrote this song not that long after the Great Depression, and there were lots of people in a bad state then too. So please rise as you're willing and able to sing "This Land Is Your Land."
to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking, I saw a sign there, and on that sign it said no trespassing. But on the other side, it didn't say nothing. That side was made for you and me. In the shadow of the steeple, I saw my people. By the relief office, I seen my people. As they stood there hungry, I stood there asking, is this land made for you and me? This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, to the redwood forests by the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me.
For our benediction, I offer these words of First Lady, beautification advocate, and 1977 recipient of the Congressional Gold Medal, Lady Bird Johnson, on neighborliness. While the spirit of neighborliness was important on the frontier because neighbors were so few, it is even more important now because our neighbors are so many. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum and shalom.
Shalom Haverim, Shalom Haverim, Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Haverim, Shalom Haverim, Shalom, Shalom.